have a wonderful literary agent on the podcast. I have Sarah Gerton of Curtis Brown, and she is amazing. Sarah shares with us so much great agenting information, like all of the literary agents who come on the podcast. She's going to give some really great query advice and no-nos and things to look for and things to not do, which is always helpful to hear, right? And then she tells us what's on her manuscript wish list right now. So she is going to be awesome. So, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to publishing and becoming a literary agent?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a strange path here because I grew up writing and wanting to be a writer. So in high school and college, I started sort of researching the whole publishing process from the point of view towards doing it myself someday.
Yeah.
So I read a whole bunch of agent blogs and, Tumblrs back when that was a whole big thing.
Tumblr.
Query Shark, Janet Reed's blog,
Yes.
Pub Rants, which is Kristen Nelson's agency blog, Nathan Bransford, all those guys. And then the more I read them talking about their work, the more I was like, wow, this seems like a really fun job. So after that, I started planning to try to get into publishing after college. And I did more research about different aspects of the industry, but I kept thinking about agenting. And I was lucky enough to snag an assistant job here at Curtis Brown. And I've been here ever since, and I love it. I do still write, but I really find nothing more fulfilling than working with our clients, whether that's digging in to find, the heart of a story or brainstorming new ideas. I was a writing coach in college, so I helped other, students plan essays and stuff like that, and that was so fun. And I did tutoring for a long time, so that's always something that I've really enjoyed, and I think agenting is sort of like the best of both worlds.
That's awesome. It definitely seems like for you it is the best of both worlds because you get to still use your love of writing and storytelling and help your clients, shape their stories into the best, form it can be. But then you get to be an agent and all the fun things that come with that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty editorial. Hopefully I'm not too much of a pain in my clients' butts. But I love, tossing around ideas with them and working with the prose itself to polish it as much as we can before we send it off to a publisher.
Yeah.
Well,
that's awesome. I love that your research into writing and like all those different blogs and all that kind of led you down a different path than you were expecting. But I
know. I wish blogs were still a thing. I mean, I know they still exist, but it seems like it's more social media now.
It is. Blogs aren't quite the same as they used to be. And Tumblr, man, I remember the days of Tumblr. I love it. Well, so you had this dream to be a writer. I'm assuming you also kind of had that spurred because you loved books. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about when your love for books began?
Yeah. Well, my parents are big readers too, bless them. So it's kind of been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. They always made sure that our house was overflowing with books.
I love it.
I have 3 siblings, and in the house we grew up in, all our bedrooms were off of like one hallway upstairs. And so every night my dad would sit on the floor in the hallway, like equidistant from all our rooms, and read us a chapter of a book, so we could all hear it where we were tucked in our beds. And we got through all of Harry Potter that way, The Hunger Games, Watership Down. Hopefully it didn't mess up Dad's back too much, but that's sort of one of my foundational memories of, books and stories. It's always been a really important part of my life.
That's the best. What a good dad to sit there and read all those books.
He's great.
To you. Well, wonderful. Well, I'm glad he did that, and it was such a focus in your childhood. I think, I have 2 kids, and we try and do that too, and read stories.
How old are they?
9 and almost 6.
Oh gosh, that's so exciting.
Very exciting, and they definitely are. They have, a great imagination, and we love to try and read, and we're trying to get them into, like, longer stories as opposed to just, like, kids' stories, children's picture books.
Well, I was wondering, do you feel is it hard to not sort of push on them whatever your favorite books are? Because that's what I always worry about. If I had a kid, I feel like I would be like, you know, read Harry Potter, like read Shadowhunters, and then be like, Mom, I just want TikToks.
Right. My husband, I feel like I loved Harry Potter, and I was one of those ones who I went to the premiere, like, parties that they would have at, like, Barnes and Noble. And
the midnight.
Yes.
Those are the best.
The midnight releases, and I would dress up, and so that's definitely, you know, something I do want them to read. But, I feel like they have their own interests to where I need to let them kind of explore their own thing, and then hopefully someday they'll want to get into Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And
that's still really exciting to see, though. It must be.
It is. I love that they
can clue you into what's, you know, what's hip once they get older.
Yes.
What the youth are reading.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and get into some query questions, because I know people who listen love getting your guys' feedback on these different query questions. My first one is, do you think queries need to stick to the specified formula? Now, that's not like your agency's submission guidelines, because those should always be followed, but this is, you know, like the golden rule or format of what most people think queries should include, which is just, you know, the information about the novel, and then the who, what, why, word count, title, without being real gimmicky.
Yeah, and it makes me feel sort of like a stick in the mud to say it, but I do think that people should follow the format. You know, and I don't care if your bio comes before or after the pitch or whatever. Yeah. But, or if it, you know, is a little bit over 300 words or, you know, things like that. But, you know, when you drill down to it, the standard format is standard because it packs a lot of important information into only a few paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And that sort of allows us as agents to deduce quickly if it might be right for us or not. And I know, trust me, I know how hard it is to pack a book's worth of story into 2 or 3 paragraphs, because I have to do the exact same thing whenever I'm writing a pitch letter for a client manuscript. Right. Or, you know, for audio or whatever. But I know it's hard, but that said, part of being an author is learning how to pitch your book in shorter and shorter formats. Like you write the book and then you know, sometimes write a synopsis and then a query letter or a pitch letter, or, you know, eventually you want to drill down to an elevator pitch that you can give at conferences or to readers or whoever. Right. So, you know, you might as well start practicing now. It's a good skill to have. It is. It's definitely a good skill to have. Sorry?
I was just saying, it is a good skill to have, but it is such a different form of writing, which is why I think
it's definitely a different skill set. I think I'm a weird person because I actually really love that. I feel like it's a kind of game to pick out the important information and see how short I can get it and still sort of preserve the heart of the story. But I think I'm just weird like that.
Hey, that's good that you can do that.
Yeah, it's you know, a learned skill. Mm-hmm. But then also, you know, when you look at the quote-unquote standard format, it's sort of a good litmus test for just being a professional and a good communicator. And it shows me that a writer has done their research and they're serious about this whole, you know, author thing. You know, as I said, I don't really care if there's a typo or two, that's whatever. But, you know, some of the queries I get, and all agents get, like, you know, if your letter is 1 sentence long and it just says, my book is too fabulous to be summarized, you just have to read it. Like, that tells me that you don't really value my time. Yeah. And you haven't done your research. So, you know, that doesn't make me super excited to work with you.
Definitely not. I can imagine that would be a tough one to sell.
You know, and I know there's a lot of information out there, and not all of it is, you know, sometimes it's contradictory, but yeah. I think if you do some basic research, most people, you can get a feel for what a query should sound like.
Definitely. And I do think it is just, unfortunately, practice makes perfect with queries sometimes too. Like, sure. You need to do quite a few drafts of it and maybe try it in different ways till you get it right if you're not familiar with that style of writing.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole different skill set than prose, which is kind of strange, but yeah. It is something that will continue to be helpful to you if you do this whole writing thing as a career.
Definitely. Well, my next query question for you is, what would be your number one query no-no? What are things that you just cannot handle in queries?
Yeah. Well, my actual number one is queries for categories that I don't represent.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm really only looking for middle grade and YA, which I try to make pretty clear in my online presence, like the website and manuscript wish list and all that. Yet I still get queries for everything from like picture books to military thrillers to like erotic romances, and I'm like, I'm not your girl. But that said, I'm sure your listeners are savvier than that, so I'll add my number two, which is trash talking other books in your query.
Ooh.
Which you wouldn't think that would be a thing, but somehow it is. It's like, listing all the things you hated about Twilight isn't going to make me go like, oh, now I'm excited to read your contribution to vampire literature. So what I would say instead is say like positive things about books that you love, and say I loved the romance and such, and like the spooky setting of this book. So that's what I tried to do in mine.
That is a new one for me. I've never heard that one, that people do that.
Yeah, it's not something I encounter often, thankfully, but,
good.
A non-zero number of times, which is what it should be.
Right? Well, goodness, yeah, definitely no trash talking. So I'll talk about first pages, so whatever number, you eventually get, but what things in the first pages will make you stop reading?
Yeah, so I usually get 10, and I'd say like the most common thing I encounter that makes me stop reading is a nostalgic or didactic kind of voice. And I see this a lot with writers who are moving over from adult to kidlit, or who haven't read, children's books in a while.
Yeah.
And it's rough because, if I'm reading your first pages, I've already gone through your query, which means you've already demonstrated some competence, and it's a really subtle thing. But I see a lot of writers who start out their supposedly YA or middle grade books with, things like, the summer of 75 was one that I would remember for the rest of my life. That's exaggerated, but that sort of feeling. And that makes me wonder, who is it who's telling this story, and what vantage point are they speaking from?
Yeah.
Because for me, one of the hallmarks of middle grade and YA is the immediacy of it, and that like in the moment feel.
Yeah.
Which, can obviously still apply to historical fiction or whatever, but when I encounter narrators who seem to be telling the story from a very distant or adult perspective, that makes me tend to think that the author has not read a lot of recent children's books or YA books.
Yeah. I can't think of one that I've read recently that started like that.
Yeah, and it's subtle because that is totally a thing in adult books.
Yeah.
Plenty of adult books have young narrators, but, in that case, it is sort of a child's experience, but filtered through an adult point of view.
Well, that is a good one to remember. Definitely want to make sure. And I feel like you've mentioned, a couple times, but it just shows how you need to do your research, not just like the agents you're querying, but also in your genre that you're querying, right? Like you need to be well read in that genre to understand what's selling and what is expected. Definitely.
I think that's the single best thing that you could do for yourself is to read books that, both the books that you loved, as a young person, and that'll help you reconnect with that part of you.
Yeah.
But also, if your book comes out, say 3 years from now, you're going to be in conversation with all these contemporary authors, and that's the context in which your books will be read. So I think it's super important to know, what kind of things are people talking about, and what are the concerns that kids nowadays are reading about.
Right. Definitely good advice. So let's talk about a positive thing. Let's talk about your favorite thing to see in a query. What's something that gets you like super excited?
Yeah, it's so hard to describe, but I'm sure you hear this all the time, but a great voice is my favorite thing. And it's, one in a million. hard to describe and even harder to accomplish.
Yes.
But if a writer can create an unforgettable voice that tells me, like, right off the bat who this character is, I'm immediately on board.
Especially
and, that can look like all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Whether it's the way this character describes the world around them, or, like, their dialogue, or even, it can obviously be a third-person story, but you can still get a sense for the narrative voice and the character voice. And if that hooks me, then I'm definitely going to ask for more pages.
I think that is something I hear often, and especially in a query, if you can have a voice in, like, the 300 words or, 2 to 3 paragraphs, that's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, that's an amazing skill, and that's when you know you've mastered queries, is when the voice comes across in the query.
Yeah. So my next question is about authors who have previously self-published. What would your tips for them be when they're querying you? And this would hopefully be with the understanding that they're querying you with, like, a brand new project, not something that's already been self-published.
Okay, yeah. So definitely, I was gonna say it's hard to get a publisher excited about an already published book if it hasn't met with a lot of success. That said, if you have the next Wool or 50 Shades, like, disregard everything I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if it's a brand new book, personally, I would say it doesn't necessarily matter that much if you're previously self-published. Of course, it depends on how well known you are and how many books you have out, all those factors, what kinds of reviews they've gotten, if any.
Right.
I would say, if I were to sign a previously self-published writer, there would be decisions to make, like, are you trying to totally rebrand, or sort of to continue the same, author name and sort of flavor, category, genre. But one thing that I say to writers a lot is the best way to sell your backlist is to, get new books out there and get more from list. And I think that applies to self-published and traditionally published books equally, that the best thing you can do for your back catalog is to keep writing and keep coming up with new stories and doing the best you can for each book to get it out there and find a new audience while catering to the one that you already have.
Definitely.
So I think it just means, like, maybe a little bit more deep thinking about sort of your author brand, even though I hate that phrase, and sort of what you want out of your career. But I think at the core, the questions are the same as any author would have to ask.
I love it. That's good advice for sure. And I love that best way to sell your backlist is to keep writing and get more books out. Because I definitely have found some of my favorite books on authors' backlists because I've seen something new and read something new that they've written, and then gone back and looked and been like, wow, look at all this other stuff they've written.
Yeah, definitely. I find that too as a reader all the time, and I appreciate that it's really hard if you've worked so hard on a book and it's taken you years of your life. It's hard to put it aside and be like, okay, let's work on this new thing. But, the nice thing about books is they're still there. Yeah. Nothing ever disappears. And focusing on, moving forward counterintuitively creates a lot of really great momentum that often leads to, something from the past sort of catching on fire.
Definitely.
And then suddenly you can talk about that again.
Yeah. It'll come back around.
Yeah.
So my last query question, what would your overall tips or golden rules be for authors who are in the querying trenches right now?
Yeah, so I have a couple, and my first one possibly contradicts everything else I've said so far, but I would say just don't overthink it. I talk to authors who are so stressed about querying, and I understand that it's really scary to put your work out there and feel like you're being judged for it. But I would tell them to remember that every time agents open a query, we're hoping too that it will be the one, so we're totally rooting for you, and we all want the same thing, which is more books. So I would try to go into it with a positive attitude, and just not lose sleep over it, because we all love books, and we're all working together in that mission.
Yes.
And then going off that, I would say, like you said, it takes a ton of practice, and also so much of publishing is about timing, which is rough because you could have written the best dystopian novel ever, but if you were querying it like 2 years ago, you weren't going to get any bites.
Yeah. And
that's just sort of how it goes. So that goes to say, just keep trying, keep writing new things, and don't be afraid to play around with your letter, with the kind of books that you're writing, and just try different things and see what's working and what's not. And work, there's this thing like work smarter, not harder. So instead of just, querying the same book until you're sick of everything and everyone, I would say, like, try to isolate, like, what you're running into and what people seem to be tripping over.
Yeah.
And then go back to, your query letter or your first pages or wherever it seems like people are stopping. Try to isolate that and fix it, and then then you'll run into a different problem, but then you can fix that too.
Right.
And so try to always be improving your craft. And then finally, I would definitely say, this is not revolutionary, but community is so important in this business, because there are so many ups and downs, and it's hard when it's work, but it's something that people pour so much of their soul into. So your friends and critique partners and community is really important. And it doesn't have to look the same for everybody, whether it's like just your, pre-existing friends and family or other writers that you meet on social media or an in-person writing group. But definitely have people in your life that you can go to vent when it's hard, because, we all encounter hard times in the querying and publishing process.
Definitely. And I think that's what's so wonderful about our, even just the online writing community, even if you don't have like an in-person friend. Like, I have some of my best writing friends who I've never met in person before, but our online community allows us to be so connected, and you're able to just not feel alone in those down moments when you're querying, because it can get super hard.
Yeah. And I think, I think you're really helping to do that too with podcasts and connecting people. So thank you. I think this kind of stuff is really important.
Yeah, and that's definitely a part of the goal, is to have this be a resource for people. And I think to hear too, like, from people's voices is always comforting for people.
Yeah, so the people are more than just, a Twitter AVI or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So I started it just as a way to connect with other writers who were going through the same thing I did, and the same thing I was going through. And, it's definitely, I get people who, email me and reach out to me and are so, pretty grateful for the different resources. So I feel kind of lucky though. Like, I get to have a cool job where I just get to talk to people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, luck and hard work too. I'm sure this was not easy to get off the ground.
No,
so that's awesome.
It is, it is a lot of work on the back end, but it is very worth it.
Cool.
Well, those are great tips as, people are starting the querying process or have been in it for a long time. So thank you for sharing those. Just a few questions left, but my one that I want to ask right now is about, you're at this point with an author where you've, read their manuscript, you're real excited about it, you get on that phone call or Skype sesh or however you do it with them to talk about, how you guys might work together. And what are you looking for in an author, in a potential client?
Yeah, so I look for sort of a balance of, I would say, professionalism, enthusiasm, and resilience. And I say that because, as you know, as we all know, when you sign with an agent, hopefully it's for more than this one manuscript and this one book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ideally it's for your whole career, or, you know, as long as it continues to be a good fit. So after I like the manuscript, when I get on the phone call, I'm really trying to get a sense of you as a person. And the professionalism part is hopefully like pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And, but then enthusiasm, you know, like you just said a moment ago, like we, you know, really have such cool jobs, like authors, agents, editors. You know, there's a lot of pitfalls to it, but it's also really cool. And I really like to keep that in mind, because otherwise it's easy to get sucked in and forget that, like, wow, I get to make books for a living.
Right.
That's awesome. And also, you know, obviously enthusiasm is going to go a long way. Authors have to be their own biggest cheerleaders, and I would say their agents are their number two. So both of us have to keep up a level of excitement, and that's sort of, I think, what drives exciting careers for authors. And then resilience, it's the same thing. It's, you know, there's going to be ups and downs in every single author's career. So I really want someone who loves writing enough that, you know, if there are tough parts to it, you know, I want someone who can pick up and sort of keep going and find the silver linings.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is important, and something that hopefully, you know, I feel like the querying process hopefully, like, builds that for you, right?
Yeah.
It'll help you train a little bit with the resilience of, you know.
I think definitely.
Yeah.
You know, for better or for worse.
Yes.
It is so tough right at the start that I think authors develop that thick skin early on, hopefully.
Yes. that is helpful.
But yeah, I mean, mostly I just want to work with people who are excited about what they're doing and who are telling really cool stories. Yeah.
Awesome.
And have visions for sort of what they want out of their career.
Yeah, and that is all good stuff to have. And I like that, you know, you talk about the excitement, and, you know, that there's excitement on both sides, like not just the writer, but you as the agent too. Like, you guys want to both be as excited about the project, and you know, be able to kind of help build each other up maybe when things get rough.
Yeah, I was talking to an older agent once, and he said that, you know, back in the day, the editor was sort of the primary person in an author's life, because you would stay with one publishing house for, you know, oftentimes your whole career over decades or whatever. But now, you know, it's a bit more common to jump around and have books out with multiple houses. So, you know, again, this is like sort of the ideal situation, and it's totally fine if it isn't the case for every author. But an agent is often like the person who's in your corner over the course of, you know, months and years and decades. So it's awesome if you can, you know, have the kind of relationship that's supportive and enthusiastic.
Definitely.
And, you know, obviously you're being professional, you sort of be part of that support system.
Yeah, I think that is super helpful. So I have a couple questions left, but you mentioned it a little bit that right now you're looking for more YA in middle grade, but can you let us know, you know, what kind of specifics you have on your manuscript wish list right now?
Yeah, I'm like pretty omnivorous when it comes to genres within YA in middle grade. I'll read kind of anything. Fantasy is my first love, but I'm always, you know, interested in finding something new, whether it's contemporary or, you know, nonfiction.
Yeah.
Or I would really love to find a YA or middle grade memoir about maybe not necessarily a celebrity, but someone who's had a really cool life, or who's overcome something, and can talk about that in a way that speaks to young people. Sort of like, I don't know, fun home for YA or middle grade. I have a little bit of YA in the pipeline right now, so I'm actually like super interested in middle grade right now.
Okay.
But I'm always open to both. And like I said, the voice is the number one thing that grabs me. So if you have an awesome voice, please query me. I usually like a touch of darkness to my stories, you know, whatever that means for you, whether it's sort of like super dark, like horror, scary stories, or, you know, if it's just something tough that the protagonist is dealing with. But that said, I also love humor and you know, funny voices, and especially if you can combine those, that is something that always grabs me.
Oh, yeah. That would be cool.
And then, sorry.
I was just going to say, I love when it can be, like, funny and a touch of darkness.
Yeah.
Really mixed well together.
Yeah, that's like catnip for me.
Yeah.
And then it, you know, should go without saying that I always want to hear from, you know, authors of color, like queer writers, disabled writers, especially if, you know, the struggle against the isms isn't necessarily the main story, but it's part of a fun, you know, awesome story that, you know, we could bring to young readers to sort of just show a marginalized character having an adventure and a good time.
Yeah. Well, awesome. That is a great list, and I hope people who are listening have some of that for you, and we'll send it your way.
Yeah, please do. I'm always looking for new stuff.
I love it. Well, my last question, I've been told, is somewhat of a hard question for some people.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me a heads up.
Yes. That's why, I mean, all the other questions I feel like you could probably answer on the fly, but the last one, like, you do need to think about it for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't, like, your favorite book of all time, just so you know. Just something you loved recently.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, whenever anyone asks this question, you know, my literal whole life is books. But as soon as someone asks, that's like, what is a book? But something that I really enjoyed recently, it's funny, we were just talking about how Backlist is helped by Friendlist, but I read The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black.
Ooh.
Because I had just finished the Cruel Prince series and loved that. But I was obsessed with Coldest Girl in Cold Town. It's a vampire book.
Cool.
But it takes place in this world, in a world where vampires sort of gather in these closed off cities, and have super glamorous, sort of like gothy lives that they broadcast on social media. And people, if they get infected, like, they go in and live in these what are called cold towns. And due to, you know, circumstances, a human girl is sort of sucked into one of the cold towns and has to survive. So I know I'm late to the party on this, but it was so amazing. And it has sort of that dark, sharp glamour that all of Holly Black's books have.
Yeah.
But it also had a really interesting take on vampires, and had a lot to say about, you know, like, social media and the internet. And it had maybe one of the best endings that I can remember in recent memory. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you have not read The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, you should go read it.
That sounds like a book that would be right up my alley, so I'm glad that you shared that. Yeah, it's like, I feel like I'm not even describing it well because it was so weird and so good, so definitely read it. I love it. Cool.
What about you? What are you reading right now?
What am I? Oh, I'm reading, what's it called? Oh, The Family Upstairs. What's that? The author, by Lisa Jewell.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so, came out, it came out last year, but yeah,
I feel like I can picture the cover.
Yeah, it has, like, vines on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just started it, I've taken a little bit of a, like, book and writing break. I'm about to have a baby, so...
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, I've just been trying to get all the other things done that I need to.
Yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, I just started reading it, and it's really good, and, you know, has got multiple point of views, which I feel like can be hard to get into at first, but then once you do, it's like, okay, now I'm rooted in who these characters are.
Is it, like, historical fiction?
It's not. I think it's a domestic thriller.
Okay.
It's got some...
Cool. Check it out.
Mystery, family mystery going on. Yeah.
Awesome.
But the last one I read that I really loved was The Other Misses by Mary Kubica.
Oh, yeah.
Her new one that's coming out, and she's just a genius. So, yeah, that one was so good. That's my favorite right now.
Yeah, I'm glad that you allow people to answer, not their favorite book of all time, because
yes.
There's no way I could answer that, but I can answer my favorite recently or right now.
Well, because it would be the same thing if somebody asked me that question, like, "What's your favorite book ever?" I'm like, I don't like. You can't pick. You can't pick
and
one.
you have different moods.
Yeah.
In different times in your life.
Definitely.
I think that's really smart.
Yes. That's why I word it that way. Sarah, thank you so much for chatting with me today and sharing a little bit about yourself and your query knowledge and what you're looking for right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys out there for listening.
I hope you guys learned a ton from Sarah, and thank you so much for listening and always helping me out with the podcast and getting the word out about it. If you can, rate and review where you listen or share it with your friends and let me know what you loved about this episode. Thanks so much.